Hello and welcome to Narayana IS. I am Pratik, your faculty for daily news analysis. Students, let us start today's DNA with a beautiful quote. And today's motivational quote is: take a moment to reflect and look back, but only for an instant, because new possibilities are just over the horizon. So, at times, it is very important to pause for a while, introspect, and re-strategize your plan, right? Because see, UPSC is a marathon, right? Maybe you may get lost during the process or during the journey to clear the UPSC examination. That's the reason it is very important to pause for a while. It's while pause for a while doesn't mean you pause for let's say days and months. No, pause for a while, introspect, understand where you are going wrong, and try to explore many opportunities or try to explore other opportunities to see how it will benefit you. Right? On this note, let us start today's DNA. So, friends, these are the topics that we shall be discussing. But for all those students who are interested to clear UPSC examination, want to contribute to the growth of a nation, Narayana IS has launched 1 year and 2 year prelims cum means integrated course. Right? It's a comprehensive course. Those students who want to, understand the UPSC process or may take time to understand the entire process can enroll for this 2 year course, or the students who feel that their basics are covered can enroll for the 1 year course. So this course will have weekly test which will help you understand or which will help you track your progress in the UPSC journey. So all those students interested to enroll in the 1 year or 2 year program can scan the QR code and our team shall get back to you as soon as possible. Right? So which are the topics that we shall be discussing in today's DNA? These are the 5 topics. The first topic is taken from Hindu page number 7. Now this article, the first article talks about unified payment interface. How the UPI has grown exponentially in our country and the challenges underlying the unified payment interface. The second article is taken from Hindu page number 6. Now in this article, we shall be discussing the Indian Extradition Act of 1962. We'll understand what exactly is extradition, why is Bangladesh requesting India to extradite the former Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina. The third article is taken from Text and Context Hindu page number 3. Now, in the third article, understand who are the Rohingyas and the problems the Rohingyas are facing, and most importantly, what is India's stand with respect to the Rohingyas in context of the 1951 Refugee Convention. The fourth article is taken from Hindu page number 1. Now, in this article, we'll understand the difference between private member bill and how the private member bill is different from the public member bill, right? So, we'll understand the difference between private and public. And last, the fifth article we have taken from Hindu page number 8. Now, this article discusses the border issues between India and Myanmar or along the India and Myanmar border. How the influx from the other side of the border is affecting the demographic pattern of our country. So these are the 5 articles that we shall be discussing in today's DNA. Right, friends? So let us get started with the first article. And what is the title of the first topic? UPI duopolies rise and market vulnerabilities is the title of the first topic, right? So you will understand the rise of UPI and the challenges underlying the unified payment interface, and then this topic is important for both prelims as well as mains, more so for means under Indian economy, right? So this was a question asked on UPI in the year 2017. So questions have been asked on UPI and their chances questions may be asked in the future as well. So we'll understand what exactly is the topic. See, before 2016, right, people in our country were using cash to make payments. But post 2016, situation changed. Initially, people used to carry money in their wallets, but now hardly people keep money in their wallets. Why? Because of the in rise of unified payment interface. Because of rise of unified payment interface. Now, this rise has been exponential in our country. This has reduced the demand or dependence on the cash. There's no need to withdraw money from the ATM. Initially people used to queue up before the ATM, but now everything is done seamlessly just with the help of a mobile phone, UPI, and the UPI ID. But there's a challenge. The challenge is that two third-party applications, PhonePe and Google Pay, PhonePe and GPay. Now, these two third-party applications, they account for 80% of the market share of all the companies involved in the process or involved in the UPI business. Of all the companies, these two companies have a hold over 80% of the market. So, the dominance of these companies, would it affect innovation? Would it hinder the small companies from participating? These are the dimensions that we shall be exploring in this particular article. I hope you understand the context. Context is that UPI is growing in our country, but there are certain challenges which we need to address. So, first and foremost, what is UPI? Or rather, what is UPI? UPI is Unified Payment Interface. See, it's a system. Many people mistake UPI for Paytm or Google Pay or let's say PhonePe. No. Paytm, PhonePe, Google Pay, they are third party applications. They are using a system called as UPI. Now, what UPI does is UPI connects the users with their banks. For example, I want to transfer money to let's say XYZ person. I have SBI account, the other person has Axis Bank account. So UPI connects my bank, that is the sender's bank, and the receiver's bank. This is what UPI does. And in order to facilitate the UPI payment, we have applications such as Bheem, PhonePe, Google Pay, etc. So, PhonePe, Google Pay are just intermediaries who are using UPI interface or UPI system to facilitate the payment from one person to the other person. And UPI was developed by National Payment Corporation of India. Very, very important point for your prelims, and regulated by RBI. Launched in the year 2016, and what it does is it facilitates interbank interbank it facilitates interbank transfer seamlessly without any trouble, right? So, as I told you, so in order to transfer money, which are the ways? One, so which are the features? It simply transfers the money using UPI IDs. UPI IDs can be mobile number. Just by the with the help of mobile number, you can transfer the money, right? Then we also have UPI IDs. For example, you must have seen xyz@okhdfcbank.com or okhdfc. This is another UPI ID. Then we have QR code. mobile numbers. So these are the different UPI IDs through which you can transfer the money from one person to other person, which means now you do not have to enter the account number of the one whom you want to send the money, which means you're not exposing your sensitive account number to the third person. And another feature is that you can maintain a consistent PIN number across different third party applications. For example, the PIN that I'll be using for, let's say, Google Pay will be the same PIN, or the PIN will be consistent or will be the same for, let's say, Phone Pay, Bheem, Google Pay, etc. So these are some of the features of UPI. Now, the National Payment Corporation of India that developed UPI. UPI was developed by National Payment Corporation of India and is regulated by RBI. So what is the purpose? The purpose is nothing but it's an umbrella. This one is an umbrella organization that manages the retail payment. For example, let's say I want to buy something from a shop, transfer money from one person to other person. I can do it using UPI. It manages retail payment. So when it comes to NPCI, it was initiated by RBI and the Indian Bank Association. So these two bodies actually established the National Payment Corporation of India under this particular act. So under this particular act of 2007, that is Payment and Settlements Act of 2007, National Payment Corporation of India was established by RBI and the Indian Banks Association, right? And then these are the 10 promoter banks of NPCI. Now you do not have to remember, just remember the number and remember few important banks like we have SBI, Canara, ICICI, Bank of India, etc. I hope you understood the difference between the National Payment Corporation of India and UPI, right? So UPI was developed by National Payment Corporation of India and it is regulated by RBI, right? Okay. So if you see that of all the transactions, of all the digital transactions, UPI account for 80% of the digital transactions. And if I have to give a number, the number of the month of August 2024. So if you see in the month of August 2024, the volume, the transaction volume of just 1 month was 20.6 lakh crore. This number reflects the extent to which UPI is being used in our country. It reflects the trust of public on UPI. Now, I don't know if you have experienced this, but what I experienced is, let's say in the year 2017, 18, 19, or let's say until lockdown, the elderly people were not safe or comfortable to use UPI for transfer, for a digital payment until lockdown. But now, as UPI has won the trust of people, each and every section, category of the population without any trouble are using UPI for digital payments. It has won the public trust. You can just see the number 20.6 lakh crore, right? But the problem is that there are two companies, Phone Pay and Google Pay. As we discussed, Phone Pay and GPay. Now these two companies account for 80% of the market value. Of all the companies, these two companies are holding, control or managing 80% of the market or 80% of the users. And this dominance of these two companies or 80% of the market, it exposes systemic vulnerabilities. It exposes systemic vulnerabilities. What exactly is systemic vulnerabilities? We'll understand. I hope you understood the context. I hope you understood the extent to which UPI has been used in our country, right? Now let us try to understand the challenges and risks associated with using UPI for digital transfer or for transaction. See, first is systemic vulnerabilities. As I told you, there are two companies, PhonePe and Google Pay, right? PhonePe and Google Pay. These two companies account for 80% of the market value. What if these two applications fail? If these applications fail, it would lead to a situation or it would lead to financial instability. Financial instability. The entire ecosystem can or will be affected. The entire ecosystem can or will be affected, which essentially means that the dependence of people on these two companies, the dependence of people on these two companies can threaten the financial stability, financial ecosystem. This is one challenge. Let's say, for example, back then when we had only government banks, and when the government banks used to crumble, or let's say uh, some problem used to arise in these, so-called national banks, the entire banking system used to affect. So dependence too much. Let's say, for example, for many of the raw ingredients we import from China. Now post the Galvan clash, right? The imports stopped, and so the business got affected. The business were affected in our country. So too much of dependency, like the way Pakistan is depending on China. Too much of dependency on anything is not a good thing. One such example. Second, reduced competition and innovation. Now see, as these two companies, see, first of all, when we use Paytm or Google Pay for transferring money, Paytm and Google Pay are not charging any amount from us, right? They are not charging any amount from us. So the question is, how can these companies operate lakhs and maybe crores of people? They are not getting a single penny. Now what happens is, see, there's a reason why the companies allow people to transfer. Let's say, for example, everyone uses, let's say, Google Pay. Now Google Pay is in a position where it has gathered the data of crores of people, which means, let's say, close to 30 to 40 crore people might be on Google Pay. Now Google Pay has the data of 30 to 40 crore people, right? They are using Google Pay to transfer money. So what Google Pay does is it cross sales, which means Google Pay here what essentially does is it tries to market their own products, like let's say loans, insurance, mutual fund. They have the data, they have the numbers with them. So they'll try to advertise their loans, insurance policies, let's say mutual funds to the customers. This is what the big companies can do. So the big companies, let's say like Google Pay, they're okay with the losses, or for that matter to maintain the infrastructure to handle the transactions of lakhs and crores of people. But using this data, what they essentially do is they try to market their products. Now only the big companies can manage, or let's say manage such big infrastructure. These small companies cannot, which means the small companies simply cannot enter the competition. And if there's no competition, then the big companies will try to exploit the market. Competition is very, very important. For example, back then, we used to get 1 GB data for 1 month at 3 to 400 rupees. But because of the entrance or because of the entry of various players like let's say Geo, there was competition in the market. Now this competition, it helped the common people. So competition is very, very important because competition, it breeds innovation. When there's competition, people will try to think unique ways to expand their business. This breeds innovation, and innovation is the is very, very essential for the overall growth of the country. And then foreign dominance and data risk. Now, as I told you, phone pay and Google Pay, they control 80% of the market. Phone Pay is controlled by Walmart. Google Pay is controlled by Google. These are the foreign companies, which means the foreign companies have the data of the Indians. 80% of the market value, as I told you, these two companies are holding it, which means they have this sensitive information about the people of our country, which means the dominance of foreign companies, it raises concerns with respect to data security and data privacy. So these are some of the challenges and risks, right? Now, in order to reduce the market value or market share of these two companies, what National Payment Corporation of India has done is it has introduced 30% market share, which means no company can control more than 30% of the market. But unfortunately, this deadline has been extended repeatedly, which means this decision taken was never implemented. That's the reason the big companies still hold or still control the market. So what is the way forward? Way forward, one, it is very, very important that we need robust regulatory framework. Robust which means this robust regulatory framework, which means we need certain, let's say, rules. Now these rules will ensure that the competition is fair. Fair competition. The competition has to be fair, which means the competition or the rules have to be framed in such a manner that each and every one or each and every company should be in a position to enter the market and compete with the other businesses. It shouldn't be the case where the big companies are dominating the market, like let's say Reliance. The way it tries to dominate the market, why? Because of a strong capital, because the capital they have is strong, which means for the initial, let's say, few years, they are in a position to bear the losses, but the other companies cannot. So we need robust rules which can ensure that the competition is fair. The second one is we have to enforce the market share caps. Enforce market, which essentially means that the 30% market cap that was uh, enforced by NPCI should be implemented in letter and spirit, so as to ensure that all these small players should and can also enter the market, thus fostering innovation. And third, most importantly, we need a balanced approach. We need a balanced. Now, this balanced approach will ensure that there are equal opportunities for all the players who can enter the market, as well as will ensure this balanced approach will ensure that the potential of UPI further unwinds and more people benefit, more and more people use UPI, and thus this helps people as well as the country. This is the way forward. I hope you understood the first topic, right? Now, let us start with the second topic. What is the title? The title is Sheikh Hasina extradition demand India's options, right? So, in this article, we'll understand about the Indian Extradition Act of 1962. We are not going to understand the other, let's say, peripheral issues. We'll focus on the Extradition Act. What exactly is extradition? Extradition, and you can map this under prelims and means, right? So, in GS paper 2, we have international relations. You can mark this under international relations, right? So, this was a question asked in the year 2021. Refugees should not be turned back to the country where they would face persecution or human rights violation. Examine the statement with reference to ethical dimension being violated by the nation claiming to be democratic with open society. So, what is the context? See, you all know that Sheikh Hasina government in Bangladesh was criticized by the people. There were protests led by the students, which led to Sheikh Hasina, the former prime minister of Bangladesh. She was forced to leave the country. So Sheikh Hasina was forced to leave the country, and then she flew to India. Now the government, the interim government of Bangladesh, has accused Sheikh Hasina of committing crime against humanity. Bangladesh, the interim government says that or states that Sheikh Hasina has committed crime against humanity, she has committed genocide, and she has to face trial in Bangladesh. And that's the reason Bangladesh government has requested Indian government to extradite Sheikh Hasina back to Bangladesh. She is in India. Bangladesh is requesting India to send Sheikh Hasina back to Bangladesh. Now the ball is in India's court. This is the context. But what exactly is extradition? Let us try to understand. Now what is extradition? Extradition is a process where one nation requests the other nation to send back a wanted person in this country back to this country. Let's say, for example, here in the context of India and Bangladesh, extradition refers to a process where the Bangladesh government has requested to India the extradition of Bangladesh wanted person, that is Sheikh Hasina, back to Bangladesh. Bangladesh or the people of Bangladesh feel that Sheikh Hasina has committed crime against humanity and she has to undergo legal process. She has to undergo legal process, and if found guilty, she should be punished. Right? Which means now the court cases in Bangladesh, or let's say the trial, can be conducted only, it can also be conducted without Sheikh Hasina, but as she is wanted in Bangladesh. Why? Because she has committed crime. Bangladesh has requested India to extradite Sheikh Hasina back to Bangladesh. Just as India has requested UK to extradite Vijay Mallya. Vijay Mallya, the former owner of RCB IPL team, back to India. Right? Now, see the extradition. I hope you understood what is extradition. The extradition in a country is governed by the Indian Extradition Act of 1962. This is the act. See, extradition doesn't mean that a country is requesting India and we send the person back. No. This is a particular act that governs, that facilitates the extradition to and from India. So there are certain rules mentioned under this act or provisions which we'll discuss. through which extradition can be facilitated. This is one process. The second one is the principle of aut dideo aut judicare, which means this principle essentially means that under the international customary law, a country is obligated to extradite a person back, or a country will be under a compulsion sort of to extradite a person back to the country that has requested for the extradition, which means this particular principle says that when Bangladesh is requesting Sheikh Hasina because she has committed crime in Bangladesh, India should, this is a customary law, India should extradite Sheikh Hasina back to Bangladesh. However, India is not legally bound to extradite Sheikh Hasina, but this is a principle. Now we'll focus on this particular act. Now, section 2, subclause D of this particular act, Indian Extradition Act of 1962. Indian Extradition Act of 1962, section 2, subclause D of this act defines extradition treaty. It defines extradition treaty. Now, what is extradition treaty? It is nothing but, let's say, a treaty or agreement between India and, let's say, a foreign nation, India and a foreign nation, for extraditing fugitive criminals. Fugitive are the ones who, like for example, Vijay Mallya. For India, Vijay Mallya is a fugitive criminal because he has committed a crime in a country and he has escaped the laws of our country. Similarly, Sheikh Hasina has committed a crime in Bangladesh and has escaped the law of that country and has flown to India. So she is a fugitive in Bangladesh. Vijay Mallya is a fugitive for our country. Vijay Mallya, or let's say Lalit Modi, not Narendra Modi. Okay. So now these are some principles under the Indian Extradition Act. One, the extradition applies only to offences listed in the treaty. So whenever a treaty is signed between India and other nation, for example, India has signed this treaty with 40 nations, with 40 countries. So India has a treaty with 40 nations. Now, which are the offences mentioned in the treaty? Right, which means the extradition applies only to offences. For example, let's say India signed a treaty with Maldives, and in that treaty, murder is not an offense, let's say, then a person cannot be extradited for murder. Second, the principle of dual criminality. What is dual criminality? Which means, let's say, if murder is a crime in India and let's say murder is also a crime in Maldives, then this treaty is applicable. The principle of dual criminality. Let's say India signed an extradition treaty with Saudi Arabia. Now, let's assume rape is not a crime in Saudi Arabia, but it's a crime in India. Which means the principle of dual criminality says that the offense has to be a crime in both the countries. Now, as rape is not a crime in Saudi Arabia, let's assume this extradition treaty won't be applicable. Third, the requested country must confirm a prima facie case, which means Bangladesh has to submit a prima facie evidence, has to show evidence that Sheikh Hasina has committed a crime. Next, extradition must be granted solely for the requested offence. Which is the offence that a person has committed? It should be, extradition should be requested only for the requested offence, and the individual must be guaranteed a fair trial. Which means when a person is sent back, the person or that country should promise the other country that the trial will be fair, it will not be biased, which means Bangladesh has to assure India that when Sheikh Hasina gets back to Bangladesh, the trial, the judicial process will be fair. Which are the other provisions? Extradition offences applies to crimes punishable under both Indian and the requesting state laws, that is principle of dual criminality. Extradition is typically based on the treaties outlining specific conditions, role of the central government. Now here it is the central government who decides if Sheikh Hasina should be extradited back to Bangladesh. The central government becomes the commanding position or commanding authority to decide cases with respect to extradition. And what is the process? A formal request is submitted by the foreign country, Bangladesh, to India. The request is examined by the Ministry of External Affairs. Very important. And if satisfied, if India is satisfied, the accused is presented before a magistrate who assesses the evidence. The individual may be detained pending the final decision on extradition. This process is not required. Now, this is what you need to remember. These are the other provisions. Double jeopardy, which means double punishment. It ensures individuals are not tried or punished for the same offence twice. A person, this again is a provision under Article 20 of the Indian Constitution. A person cannot be committed twice for the same offence. Let's say a person has committed a crime, murder, the punishment is 5 years. The person will not be punished again for the same crime. So let's say a person has committed murder. This 5 years rigorous imprisonment. Now after completion of 5 years, the person will not be again sent back to prison. There is no double jeopardy, that is there is protection of double jeopardy under the Evidence Act. Then denies extradition for political offences if there is risk of persecution. Now the extradition can be because of political reasons, right? So these are some of the provisions. Now as I told you, it is the Ministry of External Affairs who oversees the extradition request. For example, the consular, passport and visa division, these are the divisions in the Ministry of External Affairs. Now these are the divisions that oversees the request of the extradition made by a foreign country. So this is another important point. Now as I told you, India has signed extradition treaties with 40 countries. These are some of the examples of some of the countries with whom India has signed extradition treaty. Now we'll understand the challenges. I hope you understood what is the Indian Extradition Act of 1962. It is nothing but it is an act which facilitates the extradition requests to and from India. Simple. So challenges, legal and diplomatic complexities. Now the extradition is not as simple as it may sound. For example, India has been requesting the extradition of Lalit Modi and Vijay Mallya, right, for so many years. There are legal challenges, right, then diplomatic considerations, right, then political sensitivities. Now for example, India had a great relation with Sheikh Hasina. Now given the good relation India has maintained with Sheikh Hasina for so long, for so many years, India will definitely take into consideration the affiliation of India with Bangladesh or Sheikh Hasina's Awami League in Bangladesh before deciding onto anything. Which means that the political factors play a very important role. And then legal appeals often prolong extradition proceedings. Now, these are some of the global framework for extradition. This is something which you can read by your very own. These are the three global framework for extradition. For example, the first one is United Nations Model Treaty on Extradition. Now, this provides guidelines for bilateral or multilateral extradition agreements. It covers serious crimes recognized by both states. So, this is nothing but one and the same that we discussed. Just here to remember the global framework for extradition. Please try to remember these few global frameworks. Then we'll understand the role of International Criminal Court. Now, one thing that you need to remember, it's a criminal court. ICC is a criminal court. India is not a member of International Criminal Court, but Bangladesh is a member of International Criminal Court. Right, now let's try to understand the role of ICC. Right, we just have discussed that Bangladesh is a party to the Rome Statute. Now, Rome Statute established ICC. Now, crimes against humanity fall under the ICC's jurisdiction based on material, personal, territorial and temporal criteria. Again, this is not important. Now, the ICC acts as a court of last resort and intervenes only when domestic jurisdiction fail to conduct fair trials. The ICC will step into picture only when the domestic laws are exhausted, which means, let's say for example, Sheikh Hasina is extradited back to Bangladesh and let's say the trial has not been fair. Only in such case, only let's say for example, Myanmar has committed atrocities against, let's say, Rohingyas. Now, if the proceedings, judicial proceedings, if ICC feels that the judicial proceedings in Myanmar are not fair, then ICC acts as a court of last resort, which means as the last court of appeal, ICC will enter into picture. So, if Bangladesh proceedings against Sheikh Hasina lack independence or impartiality, the ICC prosecutor could initiate a examination under 15 of the Rome Statute. So, this is the second topic. I hope you understood. The most important dimension of this second article was to understand the Indian Extradition Act of 1962. So, this was the article, the title of the third topic is on India's obligations towards the Rohingyas, right? So, we'll understand about the Rohingya crisis, who are the Rohingyas, right? And this is important for, so actually this falls under GS paper 3. It's not GS paper 2, it is GS paper 3. And this was a question asked in the year 2019 on cross-border movements, right? Now, what is the context? The context is that there was a study by this particular project. Now, the study revealed that Rohingyas is an ethnic community. Rohingyas are facing human right violations. They are suffering human right violations in our country, in India. And India has failed to meet the international obligation with respect to protecting the human rights of Rohingyas. This is the context. In short, Rohingyas, the human rights are being violated is the essence or context. Now who are Rohingyas? Rohingyas are stateless people. Now, Rohingyas predominantly reside in the northwestern part of Myanmar. So, in Myanmar, there is a Rakhine state. In Rakhine state is predominantly occupied by Rohingyas. Rohingyas is an ethnic Muslim community in the northwestern part of Myanmar. Now, under the 1982 citizenship law of Myanmar, Rohingyas have been declared stateless, citizenless, which means Myanmar has said that we do not recognize Rohingyas as the citizens of Myanmar. And the state of Myanmar has committed crimes, or they have accused, or rather, they have persecuted the Rohingyas. Because of the persecution of Rohingyas by the state of Myanmar, the Rohingyas were forced to flee their country, and they came, or they entered Bangladesh and India. So, lakhs and lakhs of Rohingyas, they migrated into India and Bangladesh to safeguard their lives and their family lives. The global population of Rohingyas is around 2.8 million people. Now, the former United Nations Secretary General Kofi Annan had once said that the Rohingyas are the world's most persecuted community. This, this is a statement by the former United Nations Secretary General. The world has taken cognizance of the fact that Rohingyas are the world's most persecuted community. Now, if I talk about the Rohingyas in India, there are 22.5 thousand Rohingyas registered with the United Nations Human Commission rights in our country. Now, the official stand of India, or the India has taken an official stand by saying that the Rohingyas are illegal people of our country. They are not legal people who are staying in our country. Legal? Why? Because they do not have any documents. They have not come taking a visa. No. So they entered our country illegally. So they are the illegal citizens or people who are staying in our country. And under the Foreigners Act, it's a domestic law of a country. Under the Foreigners Act and the Passport Act, the Indian state has detained thousands of Rohingyas. Detention is, which means to put the Rohingyas in a lockup. And the conditions in the detention camps are horrible. You cannot even imagine the conditions in which the Rohingyas have to stay. There is no electricity, no medicines, no food. In one of the worst conditions, the Rohingyas are force subjected to stay. And the human right violation of the Rohingyas have been violated, or the human rights have been violated to an unimaginable extent. You cannot even imagine the extent to which the rights, the human rights of the Rohingyas are being violated. This is a situation of Rohingyas in our country. Now, the 1951 Refugee Convention and its 1967 Protocol. This convention talks about a principle of non-refoulement. This principle talks about a principle, convention talks about principle of non-refoulement. Non-refoulement principle states that when a person, for example, the Rohingyas, fearing their life, have entered India. Now, India is obligated not to send back these people back to Myanmar. The countries who have signed 1951 Refugee Convention, the countries who have signed 1951 Refugee Convention have to follow the principle of non-refoulement, which means if there is any section of population migrating from other country into your country, you cannot force these people back to go back to their original country, because this convention understands the fact that people are fearing their life, which means people, a section of the population, are facing persecution because of, let's say, race, religion, caste. It can be anything. In order to save their life, they have migrated or entered some other country, which means the country in which the persecuted people have entered, this country has to safeguard the human rights, should not force them to go back to their original country. Now, India has not signed this refugee convention, which means India can forcefully send the Rohingyas back to Myanmar. India can send forcefully, India can ensure, or India has a right to forcefully send the Rohingyas back to Myanmar. Now, why India has not signed? Because India says that, look, India is a country surrounded by all the unstable countries. Now, India have the refugees from Pakistan, Afghanistan, Tamil Nadu, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Myanmar. If we sign this convention, more and more refugees would enter our country. We do not have resources to feed our own people. If more and more people come from these neighboring countries, the Indian citizens would not get their due rights. That's the reason India has not signed this refugee convention. But there are other treaties that India signed. For example, these two treaties that India signed. Now, not signing this treaty does not mean that India will not respect the human rights of the persecuted community. No. This signing these two treaties, India said that yes, will ensure that we are not violating the rights of the persecuted community. But if India faces any national security threat, then India will be forced to send back the persecuted community back to the country they have come from. Will ensure that we do not violate the rights, will ensure that the basic requirements are fulfilled or met. But if there is a threat to our country, will send back these people to the country they have come from. So this is what I explained with respect to 1951 Refugee Convention. I hope you understood the third topic as well. Now the fourth topic talks about the private members' bills get short shrift in both the houses. We'll understand the difference between private member and public bill, right? Now, what is the context? The context is that during the 17th Lok Sabha, only 9 hours were spent on private member bills in the Lok Sabha and 27 hours in Rajya Sabha. But before we understand the context, we'll understand what is a bill and what's the difference between private member bill and a public member bill. So, what is bill? Bill is nothing but a proposal. Let's say I want to make a law which punishes people, let's say, who spit on the road or who litter on the road. Now, to make a law, first I have to submit the proposal in the parliament, in the Lok Sabha or the Rajya Sabha. This proposal is referred to as bill. Now, the bill should get passed in the Lok Sabha, then in the Rajya Sabha, or first in the Rajya Sabha, Lok Sabha. Then the president signs the bill. Once the president gives his assent, the bill becomes an act. Only once the president signs it, the bill becomes an act. Until then, the bill is a bill. This, I hope you understand the difference between bill and act. Now, what's a private member bill and public member bill? Now, when a bill is introduced by a minister, let's say railway minister, finance minister, home minister, law minister, it is referred to as public bill. Only when a minister introduces a bill, it is referred to as public bill. Any member who is not a minister, if he or she introduces it, it is referred to as private bill. Even a member of the government who is not a minister can introduce a bill, and such a bill is referred to as private member. If a bill is introduced by an opposition political party, that bill is again referred to as private member bill, which means for a bill to be deemed as a public member bill, The bill has to be introduced by a minister. Any person who introduces, any person who is not a minister introduces a bill, it is referred to as private bill. And the private bills are discussed only on Fridays. Only on Fridays. Right? So I hope you understood the difference between public member bill and private member bill. And what is the, it's the process to pass a private member bill is the same, right? For example, first, whenever a private member introduces a bill, the authority will check if all the criterias or if the bill is meeting all the criterias for the introduction of the bill. If all the criteria is, for example, the presiding officer, the Lok Sabha Speaker, Rajya Sabha Chairman will decide if the bill can be debated upon. Now, since independence, only 14 private members bills have been passed by Parliament. Only 14 bills have been passed. The last private bill that was passed was in the year 1970. This observation reflects the fact that in the last 50 years, not a single private member was passed. It shows the reducing importance of the private members bill, which means there's a high chance that only a public member, only a bill introduced by the minister can get passed in the parliament. Now, this is not a good sign for democracy. Even the opposition members, they have the right to introduce a bill, but because of the political rivalries or because of lack of support in terms of numbers in the parliament, usually the bills introduced by the opposition political members are not passed in the parliament. Somewhere it reflects the degrading parliamentary functioning of our country. I hope you understood the fourth topic as well. The next topic talks about the demographic data to stop influx from Myanmar. Now, in this, we'll understand about the border security. What is the context? As I told you, when I explained the Rohingya crisis, right? I explained the fact that there are many people from the Myanmari side who enter India illegally. So there are thousands and lakhs of people who are entering India illegally, and the demographic composition of the people who are living in Indian states is changing. So India has observed a shift in the demographic data, or rather the population composition of our country. Why? Because of the influx of people from other countries, so as to say Myanmar. And that's the reason India is enhancing border security. India is mapping the demography. India is revising the free movement regime. We'll discuss what it is in order to ensure that the influx is curtailed and stopped. Because let's say, for example, this community, let's say this is India, this is Myanmar, let's say this is state XYZ state, and a community X constitutes 70 percentage and a community Y constitutes 30 percentage. Now there's an influx of this community Y in India. So the population of this Y is increasing, let's say, to 50 percentage, and this is further decreasing. It states that this influx, now India holds an opinion that this influx is also causing border security problem, border security concern, or rather issue. This is the context. Now, mapping demographic data. Now, in order to prevent the influx of the foreigners in our country, India plans to map the demographic data, which means through the surveys, through the census, India plans to map the demographic composition of the people in India, which means India is collecting the information from the people who are living in a particular state. Let's say plans to map demographic data in Nagaland, Mizoram and Manipur to curb infiltration. So we have the, let's say, census data of 2011. Now we'll undertake more surveys, census, through which we'll understand the change of population in the country because of the influx of foreigners. Second, revised free movement regime. See, if I talk about India and Myanmar, right? See, this is a man-made border, but there are ethnic communities or the families of ethnic communities who live on the either side of the border. Now, in order for seamless movement of people, or let's say the ethnic communities into one another's country, India said that okay, the community who stay here can enter 16 kilometers here, and the community who stay in Myanmar can enter 16 kilometers in India. This is nothing but free movement regime, but this facility has been misused by the insurgents, by the terrorists. This free movement regime is used to smuggle weapons, smuggle drugs, smuggle terrorists, and this is disturbing the border security of a country. India had taken a decision to scrap this free movement regime, but yet it has to be notified, which means just taking a decision won't suffice, it has to be notified. Now, additional initiatives for regional stability, apart from the measures that we discussed before, these are the additional initiatives taken by the government of India. One, to also map the natural resources like the minerals, oil, coal reserves. Why? To boost the economy of that particular region. Second, to combat the left-wing extremism, which means so-called the Naxalites. For example, in 2024, 287 Naxalites were eliminated, right? Then we have anti-drug operation. For example, these are some data, which means the Indian government is also ensuring that the smuggling of drugs is prevented at all cost. Then these are some other measures that India is taking. I hope you have understood the fifth topic as well. Any questions, friends, I request you to please ask in the comment box. We'll understand your queries, we'll understand what issues, right? What issues you guys are facing. Right, so make sure that all the questions that you have, please ask in the comment box, right? Now, these are some of the questions for practice. The UPI has revolutionized digital payments in India, but poses challenges in terms of market concentration and systemic vulnerabilities. Discuss the growth of UPI, its impact on financial inclusion, and the measures required to address the challenges associated with its system. All the dimensions of this particular question has been covered in the topic. We usually discuss the questions or discuss the answers daily. So I wouldn't be discussing the answer, just I'll give you a framework of how you need to frame an answer. In the introduction, mention how UPI has revolutionized the digital payments in our country, right? Then in the body of the answer, mention a few data and facts to corroborate what you mentioned in the context, or rather the introduction. Then highlight the challenges associated with the increase in digital payments, right? And then also mention in the next part of the answer would be to highlight the solution, or what can India do in order to ensure or rather foster innovation and mention the competition to be fair. And then finally in the conclusion, you have to sum up, or rather in the conclusion mention what all steps India can take in order to ensure that innovation grows in our country and there is fair competition. This is how you can frame this particular questions answer. And then you have these questions, question 1, 2, 3. I request you to please attempt these questions and Please open the link in the comment box, attempt the answers, and post the score in the comment box. Again, I request you to mention or ask any questions that you're facing in the comment box. We'll try our best to answer each and every of your doubt and questions. On this note, students, I end today's DNA lecture. Before we call it a wrap, I request you to please hit the like, subscribe, and share option. Thank you so much.